Have you ever noticed that sometimes your baby is crying? Nothing seems to work. But the moment you pick them up and start standing, walking, or gently bouncing, they begin to calm down. And then, the second you sit, it all comes back. Their body tenses again. The restlessness returns, as if simply stopping is enough to completely change their state. So you keep moving, holding that rhythm, because any change seems to break it. And the strange part is, it doesn't feel random. There's a very specific pattern there, almost like your baby isn't reacting to being held itself, but to something within that experience that disappears the moment you stop. And this is where the most common explanation starts to fall apart. Most people will say your baby just wants to be held. But if that were true, sitting wouldn't change anything. The contact is still there, the closeness is still there, but the response changes. So it's not just about being held. It's not fussiness, it's not preference, and it's definitely not something they learned to do, because that would require intention, and their brain simply doesn't work like that yet. This isn't a choice, it's an automatic response from the nervous system. And once you see it that way, the question changes. It's no longer, why do they only calm down when I'm standing? It becomes, what changes in their body the moment I stop moving? And the more this happens, the clearer the pattern becomes. It's not just about holding them, it's about keeping movement. And that's exhausting, because it requires constant effort. You can't just stop. Any attempt to slow down feels like it undoes everything. And the hardest part isn't the physical effort, it's not understanding why. You try to adjust, test, adapt, but the result is always the same, because this isn't about what you're consciously doing. It's about what their brain is perceiving. And maybe the real mistake is treating this like something simple, when in reality, it's a nervous system responding to signals you can't yet see. There comes a point where the usual explanations just stop making sense. If this were only about being held, your body position wouldn't matter. The contact is still there, the closeness is still there, but your baby's response changes. So it's not just that. It's not preference either. The pattern is too specific to be about liking something. The moment movement stops, something shifts, every time. And this breaks another very common idea, that your baby got used to it. Because that would require intention, strategy, and their brain simply doesn't operate at that level yet. They're not choosing, they're not testing, they're not creating dependency, they're responding. And when you remove those explanations, what's left isn't something simpler, it's something deeper. Because this isn't an isolated behavior. It's the brain reacting to its own internal state. To really understand this, you need to shift your frame of reference. Stop looking only at what your baby is doing and start looking at what their brain is capable of doing right now. A baby's brain is still under construction. The emotional system is already active. It detects changes, triggers alertness, drives the need for closeness. They feel everything, and they feel it intensely. But the part that regulates those sensations isn't ready yet. The prefrontal cortex, the part that allows you to calm yourself and stay stable, doesn't function like it does in an adult. So they perceive and they react, but they can't regulate themselves. And this is where movement starts to matter. Because for a baby's brain, safety isn't an idea, it's a physical sensation. And when you're standing, moving, gently bouncing, you're not just holding them. You're changing their internal state. There's an even deeper layer happening here. When your baby is restless, it's not just behavior, it's internal activation. Their body is in a state of alert, trying to process something they can't yet organize. This is where the HPA axis comes in, the system responsible for the stress response. And here, stress doesn't mean something extreme, it means something simple, unpredictability. When movement stops, the body registers a change. And that alone can be enough to raise the level of alert. Cortisol increases, the body becomes more vigilant, and relaxing becomes harder. Now here's the key piece most people miss, the vestibular system. This system controls balance, movement, and spatial orientation, and in early life, it plays a major role in regulating the nervous system. When you're standing, walking, or gently bouncing, you're continuously stimulating this system, and that has a direct effect. It lowers alertness and supports relaxation. When you sit, that stimulation decreases, and the body loses one of the signals that was helping it stay stable. So it's not about you sitting, it's about what disappears when the movement stops. And because your baby can't compensate for that yet, their internal state shifts again. When you look at this biologically, one question naturally comes up. Why does a baby's brain depend so much on movement? The answer is evolution. For most of human history, babies weren't still. They were carried, in constant motion, on the body of an adult who was moving through the environment. And this wasn't a detail, it was the norm. More than that, it had meaning. Movement signaled that the adult was active, aware, and guiding the baby towards safety. Being completely still wasn't neutral. It could mean vulnerability. So the human brain developed associating movement with safety, not as a thought, but as a biological pattern. And that pattern is still there. The environment has changed, but your baby's brain is still operating with the same logic. So when you're standing and moving, you're not just calming your baby, you're activating an ancient signal of safety. And when you stop, it's not just the movement that disappears, it's that signal. When you put all of this together, one key point starts to emerge. Your baby isn't just reacting to what you're doing, they're dealing with an internal conflict they can't resolve yet. Their body needs to relax. But at the same time, it depends on external input to get there. They need movement to organize their state, but they can't generate that on their own. So when you're standing and moving, their system finds balance. Alertness decreases, the body starts to stabilize. But the moment that movement stops, the brain has to maintain that state by itself, and it can't. So this isn't preference. Without that support, they lose the reference that was keeping everything stable. And the cycle repeats. They relax. The stimulus disappears. The alert comes back. When you start to see it this way, the behavior stops looking like a demand and starts to make sense, not as a choice, but as a nervous system response. If this could be translated, it wouldn't be, "Don't sit down." It would be something much simpler. In motion, my body can relax. When you stop, something changes. And I don't know how to handle it on my own. I still need help to stay regulated. And that changes everything, because it's not about what your baby wants from you. It's about what they still can't do without you, and what once felt confusing starts to reveal exactly what it is: a developing system trying to regulate itself with the tools it has. There's one point here that completely changes how this behavior should be understood. The common expectation is that, over time, your baby will stop needing this, that they'll learn to calm down on their own, without movement, without this kind of support. And yes, that does happen, but not in the way most people think, because the goal was never to make your baby stop reacting. The goal is for their brain to gradually develop the ability to sustain that state on its own. The problem is when the reaction disappears before that ability exists. When a baby stops responding to movement, stops signaling, stops showing that need. It doesn't always mean they've learned to self-regulate. It can mean something else. It can mean the system adapted, that the signal was reduced, not because the need disappeared, but because the body stopped expecting a response. And that changes everything. Because what seems like a difficult behavior, needing movement, needing you standing, needing constant input, is actually a system working exactly as it should. It's the brain saying, "I can't do this on my own yet. I still need support to stay stable." So the goal was never to eliminate this as fast as possible. It's to understand what it actually means. Because when you look at this without the filter of common assumptions, it stops feeling like a random struggle and starts to reveal something much deeper: a developing brain that still depends on very specific physical signals to stay regulated. And movement is one of those signals, but it's not the only one, because this same pattern shows up in other moments that, at first, seem completely unrelated, but come from the exact same place. For example, when your baby wakes up in the middle of the night, not hungry, nothing obviously wrong, and still can't go back to sleep without you. That's not a coincidence. It's the same system, the same difficulty maintaining stability without external support, the same need for a signal the body recognizes as safety. And if you don't understand what's behind it, everything feels disconnected, but it's not. It's a pattern. And that's exactly what I break down in the next video on your screen. Because there, You'll see what's actually happening inside your baby's brain during those night wakings, and why they follow the same logic you just saw here. If you want to understand this fully, not as isolated situations, but as part of the same process, that video isn't just helpful, it's essential, because before words, the behavior is already trying to tell you everything.